The council chamber of the Galactic Federation buzzed with the typical arrogance of 1,000 different species, each believing themselves superior to the primitive world they were discussing. Ambassador Zeftai of the Corvin Empire flicked his scaled tail dismissively as he reviewed the datapad before him. Earth, he pronounced the name like a curse. A backwater planet inhabited by bipedal mammals who have barely achieved faster-than-light travel. They possess no significant military technology, no energy shields, no plasma weapons. Their largest vessels are crude metal constructs powered by controlled explosions. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The hegemony representative, a crystalline being whose voice chimed like broken glass, added, "They still use projectile weapons. Kinetic rounds fired from chemical propellants. How quaint." In the corner of the vast chamber, hunched over a gnarled walking stick, sat Elder Mortanis. His ancient species, the Kethmori, had been among the first to achieve interstellar travel, back when most of the current council members were still climbing out of primordial swamps. His weathered face bore the scars of countless conflicts, and his 3 eyes held wisdom that spanned millennia. "You underestimate them." His voice creaked like old wood. "I've studied their history. These humans have a capacity for what?" Ambassador Zeftai interrupted with a sneer. "For making war upon themselves? Yes, we've seen their records. Constantly fighting among their own species. They lack unity, discipline, proper command structure. They're divided by arbitrary lines on maps, worshipping different invisible deities, speaking hundreds of different languages." The hegemony representative's light pulsed with amusement. "Indeed, while we achieve galactic civilization through cooperation and enlightenment, they achieve spaceflight through competition and conflict. Primitive." Elder Mortanis struggled to his feet, his joints creaking with age. "Listen to me, all of you. I have lived through the Skarn Rebellion, the Crystal Wars, the fall of the Inner Rim. I have seen species rise and fall. These humans—" He paused, searching for words that would penetrate their arrogance. "They're not like us." "Exactly our point," Zeftai replied smoothly. "Which is why the mining rights to their system should be distributed among the more developed members of the Federation. Their sun has reached optimal age for stellarium extraction, and their asteroid belt contains enough rare metals to fuel our expansion for the next 1,000 cycles." The chamber filled with agreement. The Corvin Empire wanted the outer planets. The hegemony claimed the asteroid mining rights. The Vorth Collective eyed the inner system's energy potential. All that remained was the formality of dealing with the inhabitants of the third planet. "Standard procedure," announced Prime Counselor Vexran, his tentacles writhing with authority. "We offer them a relocation package to a suitable agricultural world in the outer territories. If they refuse—" He shrugged, causing his ceremonial armor to clink. "Well, eminent domain is well-established Federation law." Elder Mortanis slammed his walking stick against the floor, the sound echoing through the chamber. "You fools! You think this is just another expansion? These humans have something you've forgotten exists. And what might that be, old one?" Zeftai asked with mock patience. "Spite." The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several council members exchanged glances, unsure if they had heard correctly. "They fight not just to win," Mortanis continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "They fight to make their enemies regret ever crossing them. When they are wronged, they do not simply defend themselves. They do not simply seek justice. They seek to ensure that whoever hurt them never, ever does it again." Emotional creatures, dismissed the hegemony representative. "All the more reason to handle this quickly and efficiently." "You mistake emotion for weakness," Mortanis warned. "I have read their military histories. When the Mongols sacked their cities, survivors spent generations planning revenge. When their ships were attacked at Pearl Harbor, they did not just defend themselves. They built weapons that could vaporize entire cities. When terrorists struck their buildings, they dismantled entire nations." Prime Counselor Vexran raised a tentacle for silence. "Enough. The decision is made. Fleet Admiral Korthgon, Prepare the 7th Fleet for peacekeeping operations in the Sol system. Standard relocation protocol. If the humans prove difficult, you are authorized to use whatever force is necessary. Admiral Korthgon, a massive insectoid warrior whose exoskeleton gleamed with battle honors, clicked his mandibles in acknowledgement. It will be done, Prime Counselor. Estimated time for compliance, 72 hours. As the council members filed out, chattering among themselves about mining quotas and profit margins, Elder Mortanes remained seated. His ancient eyes stared at the star chart displaying the Sol system, a small yellow star with 9 planets orbiting in perfect mathematical harmony. He had tried to warn them. In 3,000 years of life, he had learned to recognize certain signs in a species. The humans displayed all of them. They were patient when they needed to be, but when pushed too far, they became something else entirely. Something that didn't just fight to win, but fought to make sure their enemies understood the cost of making humans angry. The old Kethmori closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to the void. Not for the humans. They would survive. He was certain of that. His prayer was for the Federation fleet, now heading toward Earth. Because they had no idea what they were about to awaken, Admiral Sarek Chun stood on the bridge of the ESV Defiance, humanity's newest and most advanced starship. Through the viewport, she watched the alien fleet materialize from hyperspace like angry stars being born. 200 vessels, each one dwarfing her own ship, arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around Earth's orbital space. Incoming transmission, Admiral, reported Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, his voice tight with controlled tension. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Fleet Admiral Korthgon's imposing insectoid features. His compound eyes glittered with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. Humans of Earth, his voice buzzed through the translation matrix. I am Fleet Admiral Korthgon of the Galactic Federation, 7th Fleet. By order of the Galactic Council, your system has been designated for resource extraction and development. You will evacuate this planet within 72 hours. Suitable relocation worlds have been prepared for your species in the outer territories. Admiral Chen had fought in the Martian Independence War and survived the asteroid mining conflicts. She had seen the worst that humans could do to each other. But this was something different. This was someone else deciding humanity's fate without even asking. Admiral Korthgon, she replied, her voice deceptively calm. I appreciate you giving us advance notice. However, I'm afraid we must respectfully decline your generous offer. The alien admiral's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. I do not think you understand. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification. My fleet carries enough firepower to sterilize your planet's surface. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our vessels. Chen glanced at the tactical display. Her aide was right. The alien shields were beyond anything humanity currently possessed. Their weapons were more advanced, their armor thicker, their numbers overwhelming. By every metric that mattered in space warfare, humanity had already lost. I see, she said finally. In that case, I have a counter-proposal. You are not in a position to make proposals. Give us 1 week. Impossible. Then give us 3 days. 72 hours isn't enough time to evacuate 8 billion people, even if we wanted to. You're asking us to leave behind our entire civilization, our history, our dead. Surely beings as advanced as yourselves can understand the importance of proper closure. Korthgon considered this. In his experience, most species either capitulated immediately or launched futile attacks. This calm negotiation was unusual. 48 hours, he decided. No more. Any attempt to launch vessels or transmit beyond your system will be considered an act of aggression. The transmission ended, leaving Chun staring at the alien fleet surrounding her world. Admiral, Rodriguez said quietly, what are we actually going to do? We can't evacuate everyone, and we sure as hell can't fight them. Chun turned to face her crew. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to be unreasonable. Across Earth, the announcement triggered what historians would later call the 48-hour miracle. instead of panic, instead of despair, instead of the chaos that any rational species would have descended into, humanity did something that no computer model had predicted. They got to work. In Silicon Valley, Dr. Maya Patel looked at her life's research, theoretical work on quantum entanglement communication that had never been tested beyond laboratory conditions. She had 48 hours to make it work on an interstellar scale. In Geneva, the emergency session of the United Nations lasted exactly 14 minutes. For the first time in the organization's history, every single-member nation voted unanimously. Resolution 2847, Earth will not be relocated. In Moscow, General Petrov opened files that were classified so deeply that even their existence was theoretical. Projects that had been deemed too dangerous, too unstable, too morally questionable. Not anymore. In Colorado, the emergency broadcast system crackled to life with a message that would be remembered for the next 1,000 years. This is not a test. This is not a drill. This is a promise. We are human. We do not kneel. We do not run. We do not forgive. The message was simple, broadcasted in every language, transmitted on every frequency. But what made it remarkable was what came next. Every human on Earth, from the farmer in rural Bangladesh to the scientist in Antarctica, from the child in Sao Paulo to the elder in Tokyo, heard not just the words, but the choice being offered. Fight or be relocated. Stand together or be scattered across the galaxy like cosmic dust. They chose to fight. Within 6 hours, construction began on weapons platforms that existed only in theoretical papers. Factories retooled themselves to produce materials that had never been tested outside of particle accelerators. Children as young as 12 began learning to operate systems that their grandparents could barely comprehend. The alien fleet watched this activity with growing confusion. Most species, when faced with overwhelming force, either submitted or launched desperate, uncoordinated attacks. But the humans seemed to be organizing. They're building something, reported Captain Vexai from the surveillance vessel watching Earth's industrial centers. What kind of something? Admiral Korthgen demanded. Unknown. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. They're using some kind of directed fusion process to create materials that shouldn't be possible with their technology level. On Earth, Dr. Patel's quantum communicators came online. For the first time in human history, every person on the planet could communicate instantly with every other person. The collective intelligence of 8 billion minds suddenly had a nervous system. The coordination was terrifying to observe from outside. 8 billion people began moving with the precision of a single organism. Resources flowed where they were needed. Information traveled at the speed of thought. Decisions that should have taken months were being made in minutes. And in the deepest bunkers of Earth, projects that had been abandoned for being too dangerous were being dusted off and activated. Sir, Captain Vexai's voice cracked with something that might have been fear. I think we should consider extending the deadline. Admiral Korthgon's compound eyes narrowed. Nonsense. What could they possibly accomplish in 48 hours that poses any threat to us? He would have his answer soon enough. The deadline approached like an executioner's axe. 47 hours and 37 minutes had passed since Admiral Korthgon's ultimatum. Across Earth, the impossible had become routine. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in what used to be the Large Hadron Collider, now transformed into something that would have given her predecessors nightmares. The entire 27-kilometer tunnel had been reconfigured into a massive gravitational wave generator. Around her, physicists who had spent their careers disagreeing about fundamental constants worked with the desperate harmony of a symphony orchestra. Gravitational coherence at 93%, called out Dr. Kim from Seoul. His voice transmitted instantly through the quantum network that now connected every human mind on Earth. Temporal differential stabilizing, added Dr. Okafor from Lagos. We're actually going to pull this off. Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. 3 days ago, the device they were building had been pure theory. Now, it was humanity's ace in the hole. Above them, Admiral Korthgon reviewed his battle plans one final time. The human response had been unexpected. Instead of the chaotic resistance he had anticipated, Earth had gone silent. No more transmissions. No more industrial activity visible from orbit. Just an eerie calm that made his exoskeleton itch with unease. Perhaps they have accepted their fate, suggested Captain Vexai hopefully. Korthgon's mandibles clicked skeptically. Send a probe to the surface. I want to know what they're doing. The probe descended through Earth's atmosphere and immediately began transmitting data that made no sense. Massive construction projects had been completed in impossible timeframes. Energy readings that defied known physics. And everywhere the strange electromagnetic signatures that suggested the humans had achieved some kind of planet-wide consciousness link. Sir, the probe operator's voice wavered. I'm reading energy buildup from 17 different locations. The signatures are, I've never seen anything like this. On Earth, the final preparations were being made. In Australia, the Sydney Gravitational Observatory had been converted into a massive tachyon pulse generator. In Chile, the Atacama Desert now hosted a dark matter manipulation facility that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. In the Swiss Alps, CERN had become something that would rewrite physics textbooks. And in a small apartment in Tokyo, 8-year-old Yuki Tanaka sat at her computer, her small fingers flying across a keyboard as she helped coordinate the quantum calculations that would determine humanity's fate. She was one of millions of children who had spontaneously developed an intuitive understanding of the mathematics involved, as if the crisis had unlocked latent potential in the human brain. Ready, status report, came the voice of Admiral Chun through the quantum network. Sydney online, came the reply from Australia. Beijing confirms operational, echoed from China. Moscow systems nominal, reported from Russia. 17 facilities around the globe confirmed their readiness. 17 locations that, when activated simultaneously, would do something that no species in galactic history had ever attempted. Fascinating. Elder Mortanes whispered to himself as he watched the sensor readings from his private ship, hidden in the outer system. The old Kethmori had arrived just in time to witness what he suspected would be a turning point in galactic civilization. They're not building weapons at all. Admiral Korthgon received the final probe data and felt something he had not experienced in his 200 years of military service. Genuine confusion. They're building what appears to be a communications array, reported his chief science officer. But the power requirements are massive. The energy signatures suggest they're preparing to punch a signal through hyperspace across the entire galaxy simultaneously. A communications array? Korthgon's voice betrayed his bewilderment. They're about to be conquered, and they build a radio. He opened a channel to Earth. Humans, your time is up. Surrender now or face the consequences. Admiral Chin's voice responded immediately, calm as deep space. Admiral Korthgon, before you begin what you came here to do, I'd like to show you something. A little demonstration of human ingenuity. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Who said anything about weapons? The 17 facilities activated simultaneously. For the first time in cosmic history, a single planet generated a coherent gravitational wave that propagated across the galaxy at speeds that made light seem sluggish. The wave carried a simple message, transmitted to every inhabited world in the galaxy, punched through every communication barrier, bypassed every jamming system, reached every species no matter how isolated or advanced. This is Earth. We are human. Remember our name. But that was just a greeting. What followed was the real message. The wave carried the complete history of humanity. Every war, every genocide, every act of revenge that had ever been recorded. Every time a civilization had been wronged and had made their enemies regret it. Every instance of human spite, human determination, human refusal to forget an injury. The history of Carthage, and how Rome had erased it so completely that its very location became legend. The history of the Mongol conquests, and how the survivors had spent centuries planning their revenge. The history of World War II, and how humanity had built weapons that could end worlds. The history of every vendetta, every blood feud, every generational conflict that had shaped human civilization. But, most importantly, it carried the genetic code. The DNA sequence that made humans what they were. The biological blueprint of a species that held grudges across centuries and considered revenge a form of art. Across the galaxy, every major power received the same message. We are 8 billion strong. We do not forgive. We do not forget. We will find you. The transmission ended with coordinates, not of Earth, but of every Federation world, every major military installation, every important planet in the galaxy. Coordinates that have been gathered from the Federation probe signals, analyzed, and decoded in the span of 48 hours by 8 billion minds working in perfect coordination. The message was clear. We know where you live. Admiral Korthgon stared at his instruments in shock. The gravitational wave had carried more energy than his entire fleet could generate. But more disturbing was the content. His own homeworld's coordinates had been included in the transmission. His family lived there. "Sir," his communications officer reported with a trembling voice, "I'm receiving messages from command. Every Federation world is reporting the same transmission. They all received everything." For the first time in his military career, Fleet Admiral Korthgon found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, he should reconsider his career choices. The galactic communication networks exploded with panic. From the core worlds to the outer rim, every civilization that had received the human transmission was demanding answers from the Galactic Federation. The message had been impossible to ignore, impossible to block, and impossible to forget. On Corva Prime, Ambassador Zeftai's own government was demanding to know why he had provoked a species capable of transmitting across the entire galaxy simultaneously. On the hegemony homeworld, crystalline beings who had never experienced fear were learning what it felt like to have their coordinates broadcast to 8 billion vengeful primates. But Admiral Korthgon had more immediate concerns. His fleet surrounded a single planet, but that planet had just demonstrated technology that made his advanced warships look like stone clubs. "Admiral," his science officer reported, voice cracking with stress, "our xenobiologists have been analyzing the genetic data they transmitted. These humans, they're not normal predators. They're persistence hunters with enhanced pattern recognition and an abnormally developed sense of justice. When they lock onto a target, they don't stop. Ever. That's superstition," Korthgon replied, but his mandibles betrayed his uncertainty. "Sir, their own history supports this. They've been tracking war criminals for over 80 years since their last global conflict. Their entire species has a cultural memory that spans millennia. They execute revenge plots across generations." Through his viewport, Korthgon could see Earth hanging in space like a blue marble. Beautiful, peaceful, completely indefensible by conventional standards. And yet every instinct he had developed in 2 centuries of warfare was screaming at him to run. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "incoming transmission from the Galactic Council." The hologram of Prime, Counselor Vexran, appeared, his tentacles writhing with agitation. "Admiral, what in the void did you do? We're receiving priority communications from every member species demanding immediate withdrawal from the Sol system." "I followed orders, Prime Counselor. The humans have demonstrated some advanced communication technology, but their defensive capabilities remain." "Advanced communication technology?" Vexran's voice rose to a shriek. "They punched a gravitational wave through hyperspace carrying enough data to map our entire civilization. Do you have any idea what that means?" Actually, Korthgon was beginning to understand exactly what it meant. On Earth, humanity was not celebrating. They were planning. The quantum network that connected every human mind was now processing information at a rate that defied comprehension. 8 billion brains working in perfect coordination had calculated orbital mechanics, analyzed alien shield frequencies, and designed weapons that exploited every weakness detected in the Federation probe signals. But, more importantly, they had studied their enemies' psychology. "They're pack hunters," observed Dr. Patel as she monitored the alien fleet's formations. Look at their deployment pattern. They're used to overwhelming isolated targets with superior numbers and technology. They've never faced a coordinated defense. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. And they've never faced an enemy that fights back on principle rather than necessity. The human strategy was elegant in its simplicity. They couldn't match the alien technology, but they didn't need to. They had something far more valuable, the absolute certainty that they would never give up. The second phase of their plan began quietly. Using the same gravitational wave technology, Earth began broadcasting a different kind of message. This one was targeted specifically at the Federation fleet surrounding their world. It started as a whisper in their communication systems. Technical specifications, tactical assessments, personal records. The humans had analyzed every signal the Federation ships had transmitted and were now sending back everything they had learned. Ship names, crew compliments, home planets, family members. Sir, Korthgon's communications officer reported with growing alarm. They're broadcasting our personnel files. They know the names of our crew members. They know where we're from. But that was just the beginning. The humans had spent 48 hours studying their enemy, and they had learned something crucial about Federation psychology. These weren't warriors in the human sense. They were bureaucrats with weapons, administrators who had never faced real resistance. The third message was personal. Direct transmissions to each ship, each crew member, each individual alien surrounding their world. Not threats. Something far more terrifying. Promises. To Captain Vexhai of the surveillance vessel Dominator came one transmission. We know your ship. We know your crew. We know you have a mate and 3 offspring on Hegemony Station 7. When we come for you, and we will come for you, we will remember their names. To Weapons Officer Kreltoth of the battleship Inevitable came another. Your service record indicates you ordered the bombardment of the Skarn colonies. 43 million civilians died. We have learned about Skarn funeral rites. When we find you, we will honor their memory appropriately. Ship by ship, crew member by crew member, the humans delivered personalized messages that demonstrated not just their capability to track individuals across the galaxy, but their intention to do so. Admiral Korthgon received his own message last. Fleet Admiral Korthgon. Came Admiral Chen's voice, calm as death itself. You have 2 choices. You can withdraw your fleet now and report to your superiors that Earth is not available for colonization. Or you can attack us. If you attack us, some of us will die. Many of us, perhaps, but not all of us. And those who survive will dedicate their existence to ensuring that you regret ever learning our species exists. We will hunt you across the galaxy. We will learn your languages, infiltrate your societies, corrupt your computer systems, and turn your own people against you. We will make your children afraid to say your name. We will ensure that 1,000 years from now, mothers of your species will terrify their offspring with bedtime stories about what happens to those who cross humanity. We are 8 billion strong, Admiral, and we do not forgive. The transmission ended with a simple addendum. You have 1 hour to decide. Admiral Korthgon stared at the blue planet below and realized that Elder Mortanes had been right. These humans were different. They weren't fighting for territory or resources or even survival. They were fighting because someone had told them they couldn't. And that, he was beginning to understand, was the kind of enemy that no amount of technology could defeat. The hour stretched like a century. Across the Federation fleet, crew members stared at their personal messages from humanity and felt something they had never experienced in their comfortable, regulated lives. Genuine fear of consequences. Admiral Korthgon paced his command deck, his exoskeleton clicking with each step. The tactical situation was impossible. His fleet possessed overwhelming firepower advantage. His shields could withstand anything the humans could throw at them. By every military doctrine he had studied, this should be a simple pacification operation. But military doctrine had never accounted for an enemy that fought with the patience of geological time. Sir, his communications officer reported, I'm receiving fragmentary reports from across the fleet. Crew efficiency is down 40%. They're scared. Of what? We have them completely surrounded. Of going home, sir. Of what happens after we attack them. Karthgen understood. The humans had made their threat clear. This wouldn't end with Earth conquest. This would be the beginning of a war that spanned generations, fought not on battlefields but in the shadows, in computer networks, in the very fabric of galactic civilization. On Earth, Admiral Chun watched the alien fleet's formations and smiled grimly. The ships were maintaining their positions, but she could detect the subtle signs of deteriorating morale. Heat signatures indicating arguments in command centers. Communication chatter between vessels that spoke of uncertainty rather than confidence. Admiral, reported Dr. Patel, our deep space monitoring stations are detecting something interesting. Several Federation worlds have begun recalling their fleets. The Corvin Empire has pulled 3 battle groups back to defend their core systems. They're scared, Chen observed with satisfaction. Good. They should be. The quantum network carried the emotional state of 8 billion humans, and that state was crystalline in its clarity. Not anger burned out. Not fear, they had moved beyond that. What connected every human mind was something far more dangerous: absolute determination. They would not be moved. They would not be relocated. They would not be conquered. And if the Federation insisted on trying, humanity would teach the galaxy a lesson about the cost of persistence. The deadline approached. 59 minutes. 58. The Federation fleet maintained its positions, but Admiral Korthgon could feel the cohesion of his force crumbling like sand. On the bridge of the battleship Inevitable, Weapons Officer Kreltoth stared at his targeting console and tried not to think about the human message he had received. They knew about Skarn. They knew he had been following orders when he fired on those colonies. But they clearly didn't care about his justifications. Sir, his gunner reported, target lock acquired on human population centers. Awaiting orders. Kreltoth hesitated. His finger hovered over the firing control. One press would begin the bombardment of Earth. One press would also sign his death warrant, and the death warrant of everyone he had ever cared about. The humans had been very specific about their intentions. At 57 minutes and 33 seconds, Admiral Korthgon made his decision. All ships, he broadcast to his fleet, stand down from attack posture. Begin withdrawal to the heliopause. The silence that followed was deafening. Sir, his weapons officer asked uncertainly. You heard me. We're leaving. But the Prime Counselor's orders. The Prime Counselor can court-martial me if he wants, Korthgon replied. But I'm not going to be responsible for unleashing 8 billion humans on a galaxy because some politicians wanted to strip mine a star system. The Federation fleet began its withdrawal, and across Earth, humanity watched their departure with the satisfaction of a predator that had successfully defended its territory without needing to shed blood. But they didn't celebrate. Instead, they continued working. The gravitational wave generators were retooled for permanent installation. The quantum communication network was expanded and refined. The defense systems that had been theoretical 48 hours ago were now operational and being improved hourly. Because humanity had learned something important about galactic politics. Strength was not measured by the size of your fleet or the power of your weapons. Strength was measured by your willingness to make your enemies regret opposing you. 1 month later, Elder Mortanes sat in his chambers aboard his ship, now openly orbiting Earth as humanity's first official alien ambassador. The humans had invited him to stay, intrigued by his warnings about their nature and his apparent understanding of what they truly were. Tell me, Elder, Admiral Chen asked during one of their regular conversations, why did you try to warn them? The old Kethmori's 3 eyes blinked slowly. Because I have lived long enough to recognize a species that will reshape the galaxy. The Federation has grown complacent, believing that technological superiority equals inevitable victory. They have forgotten that wars are won not by those with the best weapons, but by those with the strongest will. And you think we have that will? I think, Mortanes replied carefully, that you're the first species I have ever encountered that considers revenge an art form. 6 months later, the Galactic Council passed Resolution 4471, officially designating the Sol system as a protected territory and prohibiting any military action against Earth. The resolution passed unanimously, though several species abstained from the vote while nervously glancing at their own security arrangements. The resolution was largely symbolic. The real deterrent was simpler. Every species in the galaxy now knew that humans were watching them, that they had the technology to reach any world, communicate with any civilization, and the patience to plan revenge across centuries. The message was clear throughout known space. Do not anger the humans. They do not forgive. And in the depths of space, construction began on humanity's first interstellar vessels. Not exploration ships, despite what the official reports claimed. Humanity was building ships designed for a very specific purpose, ensuring that no one would ever again make the mistake of underestimating what humans were capable of when properly motivated. Elder Mortanes watched the construction from his observation deck and whispered a prayer to the void, not for the humans, who clearly needed no divine assistance, but for the galaxy that was about to learn why some species should never be threatened. The humans had been patient for 48 hours. Now, they had all the time in the universe. The council chamber of the Galactic Federation buzzed with the typical arrogance of 1,000 different species, each believing themselves superior to the primitive world they were discussing. Ambassador Zeftai of the Corvin Empire flicked his scaled tail dismissively as he reviewed the datapad before him. Earth, he pronounced the name like a curse. A backwater planet inhabited by bipedal mammals who have barely achieved faster-than-light travel. They possess no significant military technology, no energy shields, no plasma weapons. Their largest vessels are crude metal constructs powered by controlled explosions. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The hegemony representative, a crystalline being whose voice chimed like broken glass, added, "They still use projectile weapons. Kinetic rounds fired from chemical propellants. How quaint." In the corner of the vast chamber, hunched over a gnarled walking stick, sat Elder Mortanes. His ancient species, the Kethmori, had been among the first to achieve interstellar travel, back when most of the current council members were still climbing out of primordial swamps. His weathered face bore the scars of countless conflicts, and his 3 eyes held wisdom that spanned millennia. "You underestimate them." His voice creaked like old wood. "I have studied their history. These humans have a capacity for what?" Ambassador Zeftai interrupted with a sneer. "For making war upon themselves? Yes, we've seen their records. Constantly fighting among their own species. They lack unity, discipline, proper command structure. They're divided by arbitrary lines on maps, worshipping different invisible deities, speaking hundreds of different languages." The hegemony representative's light pulsed with amusement. "Indeed, while we achieved galactic civilization through cooperation and enlightenment, they achieved space flight through competition and conflict. Primitive." Elder Mortanes struggled to his feet, his joints creaking with age. "Listen to me, all of you. I have lived through the Skarn Rebellion, the Crystal Wars, the fall of the Inner Rim. I have seen species rise and fall. These humans," he paused, searching for words that would penetrate their arrogance. "They are not like us." "Exactly our point," Zeftai replied smoothly. "Which is why the mining rights to their system should be distributed among the more developed members of the Federation. Their sun has reached optimal age for stellarium extraction, and their asteroid belt contains enough rare metals to fuel our expansion for the next 1,000 cycles." The chamber filled with agreement. The Corvin Empire wanted the outer planets. The hegemony claimed the asteroid mining rights. The Vorth Collective eyed the inner system's energy potential. All that remained was the formality of dealing with the inhabitants of the third planet. "Standard procedure," announced Prime Counselor Vexran, his tentacles writhing with authority. "We offer them a relocation package to a suitable agricultural world in the outer territories. If they refuse, He shrugged, causing his ceremonial armor to clink. Well, eminent domain is well-established Federation law. Elder Mortanes slammed his walking stick against the floor, the sound echoing through the chamber. You fools! You think this is just another expansion? These humans have something you've forgotten exists. And what might that be, old one? Zeftai asked with mock patience. Spite. The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several council members exchanged glances, unsure if they had heard correctly. They fight not just to win, Mortanes continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. They fight to make their enemies regret ever crossing them. When they are wronged, they do not simply defend themselves. They do not simply seek justice. They seek to ensure that whoever hurt them never, ever does it again. Emotional creatures, dismissed the hegemony representative. All the more reason to handle this quickly and efficiently. You mistake emotion for weakness, Mortanes warned. I have read their military histories. When the Mongols sacked their cities, survivors spent generations planning revenge. When their ships were attacked at Pearl Harbor, they did not just defend themselves. They built weapons that could vaporize entire cities. When terrorists struck their buildings, they dismantled entire nations. Prime Counselor Vexran raised a tentacle for silence. Enough. The decision is made. Fleet Admiral Korthgon, prepare the 7th Fleet for peacekeeping operations in the Sol system. Standard relocation protocol. If the humans prove difficult, you are authorized to use whatever force is necessary. Admiral Korthgon, a massive insectoid warrior whose exoskeleton gleamed with battle honors, clicked his mandibles in acknowledgement. It will be done, Prime Counselor. Estimated time for compliance, 72 hours. As the council members filed out, chattering among themselves about mining quotas and profit margins, Elder Mortanes remained seated. His ancient eyes stared at the star chart displaying the Sol system, a small yellow star with 9 planets orbiting in perfect mathematical harmony. He had tried to warn them. In 3,000 years of life, he had learned to recognize certain signs in a species. The humans displayed all of them. They were patient when they needed to be, but when pushed too far, they became something else entirely. Something that didn't just fight to win, but fought to make sure their enemies understood the cost of making humans angry. The old Kethmori closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to the void. Not for the humans. They would survive. He was certain of that. His prayer was for the Federation fleet, now heading toward Earth, because they had no idea what they were about to awaken.